Tonight, China scrambles to contain a growing public health crisis. They're trying to build a hospital for thousands within days as millions are locked down.
He looked right in my eyes and he asked me, am I going to die?
An innocent victim, the 7-year-old shot in his own home.
I woke up yesterday morning and I wasn't 100% in.
So who'll throw their hat into the conservative race? Taking advantage of a city snowed in.
Everyone's more than welcome to crawl in and enjoy a couple drinks by the fire.
The Newfoundlanders not quite ready for the state of emergency to end. This is The National. It's now in more cities in more countries. Over 1,200 confirmed cases of coronavirus. None in Canada, but experts say that is only a matter of time. In the United States, there is now a second confirmed case. France has 3. And tonight we're learning of a case in Australia as well. The virus has now spread to more than 10 countries. In China, the epicenter of the outbreak, the death toll has grown to 41. The country is taking drastic measures to try to contain the virus. More cities are now locked down. Transportation cut off for more than 36 million people, a population as big as Canada's. That lockdown is happening in at least 13 cities, all in the same province, one of them Wuhan, where the outbreak began. And as Sasha Petrusik shows us, there is an ambitious new plan there to help deal with all of those cases.
In a muddy field outside Wuhan, an army of bulldozers is breaking ground, racing to build a 1,000-bed hospital to treat victims of the coronavirus, aiming to finish it in about a week. Here, the urgency is clear. Inside the quarantine zone, hospitals are low on supplies and struggling to cope. One startling video, which appeared briefly online before Chinese censors removed it, shows a Wuhan hospital hallway. Bodies of the dead lie under sheets next to patients being treated. It was shot by a woman who says she's a nurse. Those living inside the quarantine zone aren't sure what to do, like Isaac Taylor.
I'm worried personally because I don't even know if I have the virus, and the hospitals look like they're chaotic and flooded with people, and it seems almost like it would be more dangerous to go into the hospital than to not.
Locking down millions, blocking trains, planes, and roads is extreme and unprecedented, and some experts say it won't stop the virus because many had already left the area.
Several 100,000 people have already seen what's coming, have abandoned or left the particular provinces and gone to other parts of China. It may have only spread the condition further.
But the governor of Hubei province, where Wuhan is, says he hopes people understand the enormous challenge. It was a tough decision, he says, but the outbreak had reached a critical stage. That sense of urgency now shrouds all of China. Disneyland in Shanghai is closed to crowds, as is Beijing's Forbidden City. And across the country, public celebrations of Lunar New Year's Eve, normally loud and colorful, were canceled and dismantled.
Sasha, China was criticized for hiding the SARS epidemic, and I'm curious this time around, how much information are Chinese people getting?
Well, privately, they are very skeptical of the numbers and the message that they're getting. There are days here when the official government newspaper, People's Daily, doesn't have a single word about this epidemic in the newspaper. On the same day, it's front page news all over the world, on the broadcasts and in newspapers. So they're very suspicious that this is actually much worse than what they're being told, and that the numbers for this epidemic are only going to be going up, that in fact they're probably already much higher, and they just don't know about it. Ian?
Sasha Petrusik in Beijing. Thank you.
My pleasure.
As the virus spreads, officials here in Canada and in the United States are watching and waiting to see where it goes next. Vic Adopia with what we know about that new case in Chicago and what Canadian cities are preparing for.
At a suburban Toronto mall, well wishes for a prosperous Lunar New Year. Usually a time for friends, family, and visits, but this year some are wary.
Last year I did travel back, but this year this would be one of the considerations, so I did not take a vacation to go back to this year.
International airports in Canada and the U.S. are stepping up screening for suspected cases of the coronavirus. But a Chicago woman in her 60s showed no symptoms when she returned from Wuhan 11 days ago.
She started to develop some low-grade symptoms. She really had very little travel outside the home during that time period. And she called ahead and did seek care about 3 to 4 days after that.
Health officials say she's in stable condition and isolated at a local hospital.
She, again, is clinically doing well.
A team from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control is helping investigate in Chicago. The CDC is also looking into dozens of suspected cases in 22 states. It's a similar situation in Canada. People reporting symptoms. So far, all have tested negative.
We have a whole flow chart on people under investigation. We're not saying don't come forward if you have doubts. If you have doubts, ask.
Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver all have direct flights from China, and doctors in Toronto are anticipating they'll likely see cases of the coronavirus.
I want people to know that what's happening right now is not unexpected. I think people get very nervous in the light of a lack of information or things changing so rapidly in the media and elsewhere. That is what happens when you have an emerging infectious disease.
If anything, the Chicago woman's experience demonstrates the limitations of airports screening for the coronavirus, though its real value is to ensure travelers from China know what to do if they get sick. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
And if the virus does come to this country, practical information can be protection against illness and concern. Later in the program, we'll put your questions about the coronavirus to a medical expert, and we'll show you what can happen when people get misled by false information online. A 7-year-old boy is recovering in hospital after he was shot in his home by someone outside. Police believe those bullets were intended for adults in the house, and as Ellen Morrow tells us, it's part of a concerning pattern of violence in the city.
This man hasn't slept since the shooting, haunted by what his 7-year-old neighbor said as he helped save the boy's life.
And he looked right in my eyes and he asked me, am I going to die? That was heartbreaking. I had to turn away, I couldn't say nothing. So when I turned back, he said it again, am I going to die? And I told him, no, he's going to be okay.
Danny, who doesn't want us to use his last name, heard the gunshot rush down the street into the boy's home, where he put pressure on the 7-year-old's wound to stop the bleeding.
People are calling you a hero now. How does that make you feel?
Not a hero. Not a hero. Just did what I could.
Police say the shots were fired from the backyard of the home, piercing a window before hitting the child. The shooter then allegedly sped off in a car waiting out front. Police say the 7-year-old was an unintended victim of a targeted shooting. They say adults in the home at the time of the shooting are known to police.
We are working to determine which of the occupants inside the home was the intended target, and or if that person was in the house at the time that the shooting occurred.
It's Hamilton's third shooting this year. In 2019, there were 47 shootings, nearly double the number from the year before.
It's not something that anybody should tolerate in our community.
Police say the violence is being fueled in part by illicit drugs, specifically opioids.
This is not an anomaly within Hamilton. This is certainly something we're seeing as a trend and a growing concern of all policing partners throughout the whole area.
Back on this street, neighbors are waiting for answers, relieved the 7-year-old's okay, but still shaken such a crime happened here at all.
Horrible, horrible. Should never happen. Never should a child be stabbed, shot, beaten, anything.
Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Hamilton.
Andrew Scheer's warning Conservative MPs to stay sharp when Parliament resumes next week and not to be distracted by that race to replace him as leader. It may be difficult with the nagging issue of LGBTQ acceptance still dogging the party. And as Catherine Cullen shows us, the list of contenders seems to change almost daily.
I'm pleased to announce that I am not running for
This Conservative is joking, but plenty of others weren't.
Je ne serai pas candidat, c'est définitif.
Right now, I'm focused on making a difference through the private sector.
I woke up yesterday morning and I wasn't 100% in. I didn't.
One surprise after another, shaking and shrinking the Conservative leadership race.
I didn't feel ready to make the total and absolute sacrifice of family life to do it.
Now, Peter MacKay is in,
This is an exciting journey that we're on together.
and caucus member Erin O'Toole is expected to jump too, but the smaller field has others wondering whether they should also make a run for it.
We've got a rapidly evolving situation.
The fact that we don't have a viable or significant Western candidate in the race right now is of concern to me.
As they sort out who, there's also the discussion of what today's Conservative Party stands for, and one little-known leadership candidate is testing that.
It's surprising to you that people are negatively reacting to you saying that being gay is a choice?
Absolutely.
Richard Descaries' comments have been condemned by many Conservatives, but there is a clash over whether he should be allowed to run.
100% should be disqualified. If he had made those statements as a candidate during the federal election, he would have been termed.
You mentioned
so why should he be allowed to run?
Others say trust party members to choose the right leader.
In a democracy, we fight ideas with ideas, and transparency and accountability is our friend, particularly in the Conservative Party.
Now, there is one other very big name who's been whispered about, but people who have spoken to Stephen Harper say he's not running. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
A motivating issue for social conservatives on both sides of the border is abortion. Today in Washington, anti-abortion activists got a boost as Donald Trump became the first president to address their annual rally in person. It's an audience whose support he needs as he campaigns for a second term. Katie Simpson was there.
Attracting tens of thousands of people, the March for Life is the largest annual anti-abortion protest in the United States. Though this year's gathering could easily be mistaken for one of President Donald Trump's rallies.
It's wonderful that we have the support of the President of the United States.
With this appearance, Trump is now the first sitting president to attend the event in person.
Unborn children have never had a stronger defender in the White House.
He's the most pro-life president ever, and I think it'll serve him well with the voters.
There are a couple of reasons why this moment is so important to the president. One, he gets to bask in a full show of support at a time when some lawmakers up on Capitol Hill, which you can see in the distance, some lawmakers are trying to remove him from office at his impeachment trial. And two, it helps rally his evangelical base, a key voting bloc in the 2020 election.
He's always been about the evangelical group, and him coming out here, I think that's just going to solidify a lot of those votes.
I'll be voting for him this year, that's for sure.
Do you vote based on this issue?
Completely on this issue.
Trump's courting of the religious right helped him get into office in 2016. As a reward, the president has picked two conservative Supreme Court justices.
Where are you guys from?
Some in this crowd see those picks as a path to overturning abortion laws.
No, it certainly gives us hope.
This is a great worry for pro-choice advocates.
The Supreme Court, more than it's ever been, has become more and more conservative in an activist way.
Today's demonstration serves as another example of the political division in the U.S. right now. Division that will likely push both sides to the polls. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Soldiers' injuries that Donald Trump dismissed as just headaches weeks ago have turned out to be far more serious. Iran attacked a military base in northern Iraq on January the 8th. The Pentagon now says 34 soldiers suffered brain trauma from that assault. Half are now back on duty, but the other half are under medical observation or treatment. Trump said he was initially told there were no injuries, then after word that soldiers were hurt, said their cases were less serious than those involving lost limbs. Exactly 1 week after that powerful snowstorm swept Newfoundland, St. John's is ready to lift its state of emergency, but there is still work to be done.
This is the end of the state of emergency at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, but is not the end of the cleanup efforts to get the city back to where we need to be for normal business operations.
This is what the city looked like last Friday. More than 75 centimeters of snow fell on top of the 42 already on the ground. And add to that those hurricane-force winds, visibility was near zero. Conditions so bad, even the plows had to be pulled off the roads. Since then, people have been holed up in their homes, told to stay off the streets, but that changes tomorrow. And as Chris O'Neill Yates explains, still may not be business as usual.
It's rare that Dave Hopley closes his bakery and restaurant during a snowstorm, but this was no ordinary storm.
But nobody had any inclination it was going to be a week later before we'd open the doors.
Having taken a big hit to his bottom line, Hopley's hoping to make up some business when he opens tomorrow.
Earlier we had our kitchen staff in doing all the prep work, chopping and slicing and dicing and baking off.
Recovery will take time. There is still a lot of snow to remove. Buses will go back on the streets, but getting on one could prove difficult.
Here I am on Sunday. I'm here now today. And as you can see, this street is barely passable, and there are a lot of streets like this around the city.
Downtown is, it's the heartbeat of St. John's, so it'll be nice to see it back alive again. What's that going to be called? What is it?
Brenda O'Reilly is also ramping up for tomorrow's opening.
We've got, the place getting cleaned up. We've got places being shoveled out, all of our emergency exits and all that. And of course, the chefs are in, prepping and planning.
There's beer to be brewed, food to prepare. Sadly, a lot of O'Reilly's stock had to be dumped.
We did have perishable stuff that had to go in the garbage, and any of the fresh protein that's, couldn't last, so that had to go in the garbage.
Darkwood room.
Many business owners feel they shouldn't have been forced to close for so long. Had the city just banned cars, not pedestrians.
We have all these restaurants and stores, restaurants especially downtown, whose food was rotting away and people were trying to get food.
To help out, the Board of Trade is encouraging people to get out and support local businesses.
You might get a bump this week because Newfoundlanders are good people and they will come out and support small business.
If people have a favorite restaurant or a favorite store downtown, I think now would be a good time to come and patronize them.
After the toughest week they have ever endured, finally the end is in sight. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, St. John's.
Last summer, a runaway train in the BC mountains left 3 crew members dead. Tonight, what a former employee of CP Rail is alleging.
In my opinion, I would say it was some type of cover-up.
The Fifth Estate uncovers a series of failures in a deadly crash. You've got questions about the coronavirus? We've got answers. The new pop stars, they're flaunting size and stereotypes to march to their own beat. We're back in 2. An investigation by the Fifth Estate has uncovered troubling new details about how a CP rail crash was investigated. 3 crew were killed aboard a runaway train that lost its brakes and derailed last year in the BC mountains. Dave Seglins has the story.
The investigation, in my view, was cut short.
This police officer worked for the CP Rail Police, a federal police force paid for by the railway. He was called in to investigate the crash of train 301, but says he was denied access to key evidence and eventually was shut down.
Were they burying evidence?
I can't answer as to what they were doing, but in my opinion, I would say it was some type of cover-up.
The Fifth Estate has pieced together the final moments of train 301, a 2-kilometer grain train parked at the top of a mountain without handbrakes. It rolled away, derailing 99 cars, killing the engineer, conductor, and trainee, leaving many questions.
The investigation had no involvement with regards to the company's potential involvement or negligence. It completely had to do with what the responsibility of the train crew on that night.
But CP police say their probe was thorough and resulted in no charges. And they say former officer Mark Tateran was a disgruntled employee who committed misconduct. Tateran, who now works for the RCMP, disputes that. CP's top executive says on train 301, he's waiting for findings of the Transportation Safety Board.
When all the facts come out, we'll take a look at the facts, and if we've made mistakes, then we'll own our mistakes.
But the CP, you have your own police force. Would you be open to perhaps the RCMP coming in to investigate this so there's no even appearance of a conflict of interest?
We've worked in lockstep with the RCMP from the very beginning. They still retain jurisdiction over that investigation.
But the RCMP tells us it is not investigating and never did a parallel investigation, meaning no other police force has looked into this crash. Dave Seglin, CBC News, near Field, British Columbia.
And you can see more of that investigation this week on the Fifth Estate, Sunday night on CBC Television and CBC Gem, 9 o'clock, 9:30 in Newfoundland. Here's some other stories making news across the country tonight. Quebec's justice minister demanding answers after a man out on parole was charged with murder. In 2004, Eustachio Galese was found guilty of killing his partner. Last fall, the parole board granted him permission to meet women for the purpose of, quote, responding to his sexual needs. He's now been charged with killing a 22-year-old woman. Radio-Canada has confirmed the victim was a sex worker.
And it's the same union that has fought with every government, every premier for 30 years. And people see it. And they're, be frank, they're getting fed up.
Doug Ford blaming Ontario's ongoing labour conflict on union leadership. The premier says he's not considering back-to-work legislation amid rotating teacher strikes in the province, but stressed the government won't budge on a 1% public sector wage cap that's set to remain in place for the next 3 years. And Quebec police have recovered the body of one of 5 missing snowmobilers. They say the body was found in a river about 2 kilometers downstream from where the group broke through the ice on Tuesday night. Police have not identified the body. The snowmobilers were all French tourists. We have some strange video to show you now from China, unverified but widely shared on the internet. And it's just one example of how social media is fueling fears about the coronavirus. Coming up, we'll separate the fact from fiction.
I still deal with people that are trying to tell me what to wear.
The new generation of musicians that is substance over style.
If you know that you don't own me, I'll let you play the role.
Billie Eilish up for Best New Artist at this weekend's Grammy Awards. And Lizzo nominated in the same category. Two very different artists with completely different styles, but the pop stars have something powerful in common, and it's catching on. As the CBC's Zuleika Nathu tells us, women are feeling more empowered in the industry to take control of their music and their image.
Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say.
Two-time Grammy winner Melanie Fiona remembers when record execs were just as keen to plug her sexuality as much as her music.
There's a certain box you have to fit in, a type, not be too much of this, but don't be too little of that.
I don't want to be without you.
The Canadian singer says for pop stars, the days of a woman having to conform to a label's expectations are diminishing, thanks to artists like
So you're a tough guy, like you're really rough guy.
18-year-old Billie Eilish. She's being hailed by many as the voice of her generation, as much for refusing to comply with a certain look as for her music. She's nominated for 6 Grammys.
I'm the bad guy.
Lizzo leads this year's nominations with 8. She says she's stepping away from Twitter after sustained attacks, much of which is about her body, like this viral clip from fitness enthusiast Jillian Michaels.
It isn't going to be awesome if she gets diabetes.
But Lizzo has also developed a massive fan base, promoting body positivity and self-love. At this glitzy pre-Grammy event, Beyoncé's publicist and former music executive says Lizzo and stars like her aren't letting others speak for them.
They're like, okay, you may or may not give me a cover. You may or may not write about me. Here's my Instagram. Here's an exclusive track. Here's what I want to say. So there's so much power in that.
And it's inspiring emerging talent.
I wish I could hurt you bad.
Canadian Jessie Reyes is nominated for her first Grammy this year for Best Urban Contemporary Album.
I still deal with people that are trying to tell me what to wear.
The Toronto-born musician isn't letting anyone tell her who she should be, and credits Lizzo, Eilish, and others for helping break the mold.
I think that sets a really dope example for younger women.
Girl, tie your hair up if you wanna be stars.
So she's adding her voice to that chorus, so more people will hear the call for change. Zuleika Nathu, CBC News, Los Angeles.
A mysterious disappearance off Vancouver Island and the desperate search underway.
Travis! It's on sequence! Come up!
Travis Thomas vanished more than a year ago on an uninhabited island. The clues he's still alive. And answering your questions about coronavirus, the symptoms, the risk, and what makes it different from the flu. Welcome back. Here's some other stories making news around the world tonight.
It was a boom. It was a boom, but I mean, it was just so shocking. It was like out of a movie. I mean, it was like it wasn't really happening.
An early morning explosion at a Houston manufacturing business killed 2 people and shook much of the city. Surveillance video shows the moment of the blast. Homes were knocked off their foundations, windows shattered, garage doors ripped from their hinges. The 2 dead are believed to have worked at the business. No word yet on the cause. At least 18 people are dead and hundreds more injured after a powerful 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck Turkey. Government officials say dozens of buildings collapsed and the race is on to save those trapped inside. Tonight, a bit of good news as one woman was pulled alive from the rubble. Making the search more difficult, there have been several strong aftershocks. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson signed the EU withdrawal agreement today, paving the way for Britain's exit from the European Union next Friday. Just hours earlier, the bloc's 2 most senior figures did the same at a closed-door ceremony in Brussels. The EU Parliament expected to ratify the divorce deal next Wednesday in a vote that is considered a formality. Back now to our top story, the deadly coronavirus that has spread from China to at least 11 countries. And public health officials say it's likely to reach Canada. So we're giving you key information to better understand the risk. In a moment, an infectious disease specialist will answer some of your questions. But first, a quick look at how it spread this far. This is Ground Zero, Wuhan, central China's most populous city with about 11 million residents, a transportation hub filled with outdoor markets. In mid-December, some shop owners in one of those markets came down with fevers, fatigue, dry coughs. A 61-year-old man checked into hospital when his cough got worse. By the end of December, doctors were concerned they were dealing with a SARS-like virus. That market was shut down on New Year's Day. And a week later, authorities confirmed the first known death from this outbreak. A coronavirus usually circulates among animals, most often bats and snakes. Their droppings can contaminate fruits and vegetables eaten by livestock. These so-called wet markets are common in China, where caged chickens and raw meat are sold side by side, conditions that can lead to that rare transmission from animals to humans. The virus is new, it's mutating quickly. Scientists don't yet have a name for it. Hospital staff simply charting it up as 2019-CoV. The coronavirus has spread to parts of Asia, and now there are confirmed cases in France and the United States.
We'll go to some questions.
So far, no reported cases in Canada, though health officials say several people are under observation. With the shutdown of Wuhan and the cancellation of Lunar New Year celebrations, the Chinese government is now watching to see if this outbreak can be contained. Well, with new cases emerging every day, there are lots of questions on the minds of many of you. And Dr. Isaac Bogosh is an infectious disease specialist from Toronto's University Health Network. He joins us now, and we're going to try to answer as many of your questions as we can. And Doctor, let's start with this. How contagious is this virus?
It's a great question because we still don't actually have the answer to that. We know it's contagious enough that it can be transmitted from person to person, but the question of how easily is it transmitted from person to person still remains unknown.
And what does it do if somebody is infected? What does it do to their body?
We know people will have the involvement of the upper respiratory tract, and it certainly has shown clinical evidence to move to the lower respiratory tract and cause evidence of pneumonia. So people are presenting with fevers, coughs, and shortness of breath. And sometimes on some of the data we're getting from China, we've seen some evidence of x-rays that have evidence of pneumonia in it.
So another question people have, how deadly is this virus?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot unknown about this virus, and we've heard about some of the deaths associated with it, but what we don't really know is what proportion of people who are infected have a severe illness and end up succumbing to this illness.
How likely is it that there are many people, for example, in China, who have this virus or infected by it, but the authorities don't even know about it and they survive?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we certainly are hearing about people who have tested positive. The question is, are those people that tested positive a group of individuals who are just a little bit sicker and they ended up going to seek medical attention? So it's a bit of what we call a selection bias, and we're selecting for a sicker group of people. And what's currently unknown is, are there a larger group of people that might not have been sick enough and might not have had severe enough symptoms to seek medical attention, but still had this infection?
There is a number of people, and I may be among them. When you hear about a disease, all of a sudden you start feeling like you have the symptoms of those diseases. And it is flu season in Canada, and I'm sure some people are curious about the differences between the coronavirus and flu. Let's talk about those symptoms, that kind of cluster of symptoms.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult to distinguish between the two of these just on a clinical spectrum alone. Both of them can cause fever. Both of them can cause shortness of breath. Both of them can cause a cough. So I think it will be very challenging just to look at clinical behavior and tease this apart. The real key here is if someone's had recent travel to China or perhaps a recent exposure to someone that might have had this. I mean, that's going to be the kickoff.
Which I think we've seen so far. For example, the case diagnosed in Chicago is somebody who came to Chicago from not just China, but I think Wuhan, right? So we're seeing kind of those direct connections, at least to this point. You know, yesterday there was a lot of coverage and news alerts on the cable channels, for example, about how this had not yet been declared a global health emergency. Why not, do you think?
I think they're still debating whether or not this constitutes a global health emergency. And certainly the message from the World Health Organization was that this is an emergency in China. And they also mentioned that, you know, this is a rapidly evolving situation, and they still may declare this a global health emergency in the coming days. But as of yesterday, they didn't feel that there was enough of an international concern to declare this a global health emergency.
And, you know, international concern, it's going to take, I think, an international effort to try to deal with this. And so from where you're sitting, is China doing enough?
Yeah, it's actually impressive at how transparent China has been and the steps that China has taken to really get this under control. Certainly from the very beginning, it was only about 2 weeks after we heard of the grumblings of this epidemic in Wuhan, where we had Chinese scientists essentially get the genetic sequence of this virus and make it publicly available to the world. We've had constant updates from the Chinese Centers for Disease Control and more local public health groups in Wuhan and in surrounding cities release some data and some information about what they're seeing, some of their case numbers. So we've had a lot of information from China. It appears to be vastly different from the experience in 2002 and 2003.
Sure is nice getting your answers to these questions. Thank you very much.
Oh, anytime.
That information from China can get lost amid the lies and misleading posts that are swamping social media. Thomas Dagler shows us the trouble that can cause.
People are starting to drop on the floor.
Search social media these days and you'll find plenty of this. Unverified video showing people in China apparently falling to the ground, stricken with the coronavirus.
So you could guess everybody got infected.
There's no evidence to back up those claims, nor to confirm other unfounded information shared widely, like the assertion that the virus can be thwarted with nicotine, or that a vaccine was patented 5 years ago. The stream of misinformation leading public health officials to make this plea.
To rely on evidence-informed, credible sources of information when you're looking for updates.
Online rumors can have real-world consequences, like on this flight that just landed from China. A Toronto woman's post about returning home from Wuhan got shared and morphed into the false accusation she had escaped and should be quarantined. Pearson Airport even promising to share this information with Canada's Immigration Department. But as the flight arrived, the woman wasn't there. Her husband telling us she delayed her return for her own safety, fearing a social media mob.
The internet disseminates nervousness very well. It takes unverified information and spreads it around the world faster than it can be corrected or put into context.
This flood of falsehoods fueled by a lack of understanding of the virus itself. At UBC, Alfred Hermida is tracking the ever-growing chatter. He spotted 24,000 tweets on Monday.
So far today, it's nearing 500,000.
He says they're not all bad, though.
What my analysis shows is that some of the most shared messages are around how to stay safe, how to avoid infection.
When something unverified can raise fear for no reason, it's best to check the source before sharing. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, a traditional healing practice sent Travis Thomas to an isolated island off the BC coast. And then he disappeared.
What would you do? What would you be doing if that was your child out there?
Now, more than a year later, the mysterious signs that he's still alive. This next story involves a mysterious disappearance off the BC coast. In July 2018, a father of 4 was struggling to clean up his life, so he agreed to be sent away to an uninhabited island as part of a traditional First Nations healing practice. Since then, no one has been able to find him. But as Greg Rasmussen explains, relatives swear they have seen him alive.
Almost daily, Louis Frank makes this bone-jarring journey in the waters off the west coast of Vancouver Island.
He has trails all the way along.
He's brought us along on the increasingly desperate search for his nephew, now missing more than 500 days.
Right up here is where they first put Travis. For the first 6 days he was here.
Oh yeah, thank you to everyone who bought tickets.
39-year-old Travis Thomas agreed to go to uninhabited Bartlett Island to help him recover from his struggles with alcohol, part of a downward spiral triggered by the death of his wife. Isolating people is a traditional practice in Ahousaht to reconnect people to the land and help them battle their demons.
For us, it's a place of healing. It's where we put our people out there that are struggling in their life to heal.
But when it was time to leave, Thomas couldn't be found.
So there are no trails here when you first started searching?
No, there's nothing.
For a year and a half, his family has searched.
See, get down this one. He uses it. He sleeps in this one.
Finding hints he's alive.
Oh, it goes in a ways, huh?
Yeah. Still in there.
There is a candle, a cross standing up.
Like this cross found 5 months ago in this cave alongside pictures of his family.
That's what I hold on to, is that one day it's going to come to me or to somebody that's out here, say, I'm ready to come home now. Take me home. And that's what I wake up to every day. That maybe today's the day. Travis! It's on sequence! Come have a crumbs of cinnamon bun with me! And by the fire! Chikwa! Chikwa in language means come here.
They've set up this camp with clothes,
this is fish jerky,
food, even a place to shave and clean up. All because Frank and others say they have repeatedly spotted Thomas on the island.
But you've personally seen him?
Yeah, I've seen him a few times.
Yeah. Up on the hill above the camp
here? Up on the hill, yeah. Yeah, his hair is really long. He's got a real full beard now.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't shaved for a while.
He believes Thomas watches from afar, convinced everyone he sees is an enemy. Since he's gone missing, hundreds of people have carried out several major searches.
Travis, come out, Trav!
Left behind photos of family and pleas for a safe return.
Do you have his one where he's rapping with Alan?
In the isolated village of Ahousaht, relatives gather to share memories and watch videos.
Just to hear him, hear him talk.
Guys can all go in, take the winter challenge.
Thomas stood out. First as a star basketball player, and later as a coach. His aunt, Lisa Sabas, clings to hope.
It's emotional, very emotional. There's days you cry, there's days you wonder.
Anything for my brother. Woo.
So they search, even managing a laugh as they brave high seas, battling the waves in a winter storm. She says they don't have a choice.
Well, what would you do if it was your child? What would you do? What would you be doing if that was your child out there?
Hardest hit, Thomas's 4 children and grandchild.
They miss their dad lots. Yeah. So much.
It's images like this that give the family hope, captured at night on a robotic trail camera. This video shows a figure on the island, which helped convince Alfred Dick to continue searching.
After 8 months, I was ready to call it quits, and then they start seeing him again, or they start getting signs that he was there.
Despite their hardship, the family's reluctant to criticize the decision to put Thomas on the island. Ahousaht's chief says no one else will be placed there without a thorough mental health screening. As for the ongoing search, they say the RCMP has fallen short.
They've made their appearances. They've, to say that we went out there, but.
While we were on the island, this RCMP helicopter appeared. A spokesperson said it was part of their ongoing efforts, which have included using tracking dogs and bringing in specialized search and rescue experts.
So have you seen footprints down that you think might be his? Or
when he goes in between the islands.
For now, the family continues the search largely on its own.
My heart is, I know he's here because I seen Travis. I heard Travis. I know he's alive. I know he is.
But after more than 500 days, Louis Frank had to turn for home, once again without answers. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Bartlett Island, BC.
When we come back, getting creative after that record-breaking snowfall.
A couple buddies came over and we had a few cold ones, did a little bit of prospecting, and here we are.
Playing in the snow isn't just for kids. That is next in tonight's moment. But first, there's another way one Newfoundlander chose to remember the past week with good humor and good music. Here's a bit of Sean Panting's musical tribute to the blizzard.
Been shoveling and hauling and cursing the snow, for like the old Honda, she certainly blows. For a week we've been prisoners of storm system's whims, while storm chips run low and we stay settled in a state of emergency all over town. But still there's an upside to balance the down. We got to find out what our neighbors' names are while we all played a fun game of Dude, Where's My Car?
you described the town as the last place you'd ever want to end up.
No, I described the town as the last place I'd ever want to end up.
Just follow my lead.
Have fun with it.
Gotcha. We're never getting out of here.
Well, that's bleak.
Download today. CBC Listen. Hear it all here.
As the state of emergency is set to lift in St. John's, you'd think most people would be eager to leave all that snow behind, but not all Newfoundlanders are ready to see it go. Cabin fever has sparked creativity among some residents, and the results? Well, that's our moment.
I had to get outside and create something. I dug for about 24 to 25 hours, and then I spent probably another 2 or 3 hours just smoothing down the interior. It's been coined the Yoda House, and we do like Star Wars. This is me, this is my imagination, and this is my fun.
My buddy sent me a Snapchat and he was scratching his head wondering if he's too old to still play in snow. And I said, absolutely not. Everyone's asking to come over and everyone's more than welcome to crawl in and enjoy a couple drinks by the fire, electric fireplace. It's great to get out of the house and come and enjoy the outdoors, indoors. I did some awesome bacon pesto grilled cheese sandwiches last night and I'm hoping to do maybe a little frying pan pizza later this evening. I'm going to remember this forever. This was one for the books for sure.
I run out of words to marvel at what we just saw there. Keith apparently has spent every single evening in that snow fort, if I may call it a snow fort. Julie apparently, that snow fort of hers has 5 rooms. There's another family with a tiki bar and they've had neighbors come over. It almost makes me miss having all that snow in your backyard. That is The National for this Friday, January 24th. Good night.